It was 2020 when I came across this gentleman on the internet. Someone so deeply successful in the material world was talking about life and philosophy in a not so sensational way.
Every man has two lives, and the second starts when he realizes he has just one.
He wasn't speaking like one of those motivational speakers or life coaches on the internet.
Peace, to me, peace is happiness at rest, and happiness is kind of peace in motion. All of man's problems arise because he cannot sit by himself in a room for 30 minutes alone.
His energy was calm, his way of speaking was very free, and his ideas seemed very practical. I was 19 years old at that point and honestly very impressionable. I was drawn into all of this. My conversations with my friends shifted from surface level, did you watch that movie and stuff, to actually talking about the absurdity and complexity of life. The conversations started to revolve around ideas instead of just talking about whereabouts. And perhaps it might have seemed very cheesy or cringe back then, but I did not care. I simply did not care. I started reading about philosophy. I read a book that Naval recommended. I read a book around Naval. And in a very classic internet fashion, I can actually claim that afternoon when I discovered Naval, actually changed my life. But not in the way one might think. In fact, I never actually implemented any of the advice that Naval has given. I never directly or consciously went and did a few things just because Naval was saying so, or just because I thought that would change my life. And yet, when I look back, a lot seems to have changed. I am definitely not the person that I was a few years ago. And while a lot of that could be accredited to circumstances and adulting, I simply cannot downplay the role listening to Naval and reading a lot of the stuff that Naval had talked about. So what had exactly happened back then was I had developed this habit of sleeping to podcasts. So I'm not sure if it's a good habit or a bad habit. I still have it. But basically the thing is, if I don't have something that I'm passively listening to while I fall asleep, I cannot fall asleep. So back then I used to constantly be in search for good speakers or good orators or people who can generally speak well. And that was when I had discovered Naval. And I started using his podcast as a means to sleep. And I felt like this is something that calms me down and puts me to sleep. And I never even reflected upon what impact that was having on me until I came across this post on Reddit. The post read something along the lines of, is Naval's advice actually good enough or reliable enough to be successful? And then the user goes on to elaborate in the sense that Naval has this way of speaking which feels nice, but can I use that advice and get successful? And that got me thinking, what the fuck have I been doing all these years listening to Naval if I never really acted on his advice or if I never really implemented his ideas in any way, shape or form? Turns out one doesn't always need actionables, or one doesn't always need to consciously follow advice. So one of the good things about this philosophy phase that I had gotten in was I had picked up reading, and I had started off with this book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And again, I had started off with this book because Naval recommended this book in one of his podcasts or interviews, and it was at that point a very boring read, I'll be very honest. But then slowly and gradually I was able to grasp the depth of what the book had to say or what the author had to say. Then I started fooling around a little bit with Stoicism. This is Meditations, Selected Letters from a Stoic. And then I also read this book. This is a book that Naval recommended quite a lot. It's Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. It has this very beautiful lyrical way of writing. And this book in particular dives deep around the idea of wisdom, around advice and enlightenment, listening to other people, and then language and all of that, right? Very abstract but nuanced ideas. And this book, I think, is one of the main reasons why, even though I was listening a lot to Naval Ravikant, I was never following his advice. Something Naval and Kapil Gupta talk about often is prescriptions. Prescriptions are like actionables that people are chasing in the hope that this could fix their issues or in the hope that this could change their life. So just blueprints to success or 7 steps to getting rich and that sort of stuff. So for example, if I want to start a cosmetics business, I can go and ask a successful cosmetics business entrepreneur and ask him how he did it. And if I use the exact same steps for myself, there is a high chance that I might not succeed the way he did, or in fact, there is a high chance I might actually completely fail. And so prescriptions in general in life are just not worth it. And this is something Naval himself admits to. Sure, a lot of the stuff that he talks about, especially the stuff around money and wealth, is packaged as prescription or actionable advice. But from what I've seen Naval talk about, these are merely reminders for himself. And someone else's reminders might be nice to listen to. They might even be relatable. But they're not supposed to be implemented as it is in our own lives. But just listening to those podcasts actually brought in monumental changes in the way I operate in my daily life now. So for example, Naval in his interview with Chris Williamson talks about how he spends his time. And he says something along the lines of, life is too short, so why do you want to do things that you don't actually want to do?
Yeah, I just view it as everyone's wasting their time on it. Don't do something you don't want to do. Why are you wasting your time? There's so little time on this earth. Life goes fast. What is it, 4,000 weeks? That's your lifespan. And yes, we hear that, but we don't remember it. But I guess I'm keenly aware of how little time I have, so I'm just not going to waste it.
In general, he just does things that he likes doing. He ruthlessly eliminates things that he doesn't like doing. And when I'd first come across this idea, it didn't seem very new to me. But yet there was something distinct about the way Naval was talking about this. Previously, every single time I had heard this common piece of wisdom that life is short and all of that, it used to come with a continuation that life is short, so do this. Life is short, so do that. And when Naval was speaking about life being short, he was speaking it in a way, or he was framing it in a way that was, life is short, so don't do this. Life is short, so don't do that. Don't do things that you don't want to do. One of the first things that happened was that I stopped doing chores that I did not enjoy doing. And it sort of also came off with a certain sense of rebellion as well. Because I was conditioned to say yes. I was conditioned to, help others and sort of be this person who doesn't disappoint other people. So the moment I started saying no to things, it got pretty rebellious. I remember in 2021 or so, I purchased a robot vacuum cleaner. My mom was like super furious back then because she was like, why will you spend so much money on a gadget when you can do something manually? And I know that argument itself sounds very twisted for someone like me now, but for a parent's generation, it makes a lot of sense. Like, if you can do something by yourself, and if it's not that big of a deal, then why would you actually spend money on it? And that was the thinking and conditioning that I grew up with. But now that way of thinking is actually completely replaced by the fact that I just don't want to do things that I don't want to do. And of course, it's not very black and white. There are still days where I have to do things that suck, or that things that I just don't want to do. But the number of chores and things that I didn't want to do back in the days was really high if I compare that to today. And again, I never consciously sat down to think and reflect upon this idea, but it very naturally happened that slowly and gradually I started saying no to things. It's not even like I'm trying to force myself to say no to things. It's not even like I'm trying to learn the art of saying no. It's just happening naturally. And in all honesty, this one change in my behavior has been life-altering. Another monumental idea that Naval talks about is finding something that feels like play to you. Now, understanding this idea experientially took me a lot of time, but once I did, I could never look at job or hobbies or passions the same way I did. The idea is very simple. If you can find something that feels like play to you, you will not burn out, you will not feel stressed out, you will do things not with an ulterior motive of getting rich or making more money. And that intention of doing something just for the sake of having fun is reflected in the kind of work that you do. And that naturally, indirectly leads you to success, or there is a higher chance that it might actually lead you to success, right? So for example, when I do my individual practice, so I'm not going to become a footballer. And yet, every single day when I don't have my football practice, I will do my practice drills on my own, right? And externally, it might seem like I'm working hard or I'm aiming towards something or I'm doing it because I want to build something in life and stuff. But in reality, I'm just doing that because it seems fun to me. Unlike a lot of people, I like doing football drills. I like playing with my friends, sure, but even when I don't have my friends, I still like playing with the football. And this idea of finding something that feels play-like to you, that might be work for others, this changed my perspective on hard work and success. I used to always be conflicted upon what is it that these people are doing? What is that these people who are deeply successful in their fields, they are doing differently? And I used to think that hard work is the option. And it turns out it's not exactly hard work, right? For a lot of people, for a lot of success stories, they are doing that because they just genuinely like doing that. Because they like doing that, because it's fun to them, they can do that same thing for 12 hours instead of doing it for 6 hours or so. And again, when I came to this realization, I never actually consciously and actively went out to chase things like that might seem fun, that I can monetize, right? But what actually happened was that I became more aware of the things that I like doing and the things that I can actually monetize in this process. And then the final thing, this has changed the way I look at money and my finances and wealth in general. And it's a pretty popular one. It's a very common piece of advice that people associate Naval with. And that is, you're not going to get rich renting out your time. And I think this idea itself has quite honestly backfired as well. I feel very restless every time I'm trading my time for money. It feels like I'm not doing enough, or it feels like I'm not doing the right thing. The idea again is very simple. Active form of making money is not going to make you wealthy. It can make you rich, it can inflate your lifestyle, but to build wealth with that is like slightly tricky and difficult. You need some form of leverage that is bringing you wealth. So having a job where you're being paid for your expertise and not just the time that you're putting in, right? That is the real deal. 5 years later now, I don't look at businesses, I don't look at jobs and money the same way I used to. And this is pretty significant for me because I grew up with a traditional set of ideas around wealth and money. I thought saving was the answer to these money problems. Naval's advice has not made me successful in the material world. These podcasts, what listening passively to his interviews and podcasts has done, is something, in all honesty, beautiful. It has changed my worldview in the way I never even thought. It has changed my worldview without actually me trying to do something. And maybe it could be credited to the way he talks and all of that, because quite honestly, a lot of the ideas that Naval has, that is commonly known wisdom, right? It's not something super rare that he's bringing out of his pocket. But the way he describes those things, the way he has done those things in his life, there is something oddly special about it. One thing he speaks about is physical aspects in life are about discipline and consistency, but mental aspects in life are about understanding. And I think that's what listening to these podcasts has done to me. It has evoked a sense of understanding, a perspective of looking at things, a certain awareness of approaching things. And this is a very recent realization I've had while I was making this video. Advice oftentimes is very contextual and deeply dependent on the advisor himself. It might give you the illusion that it could fix your life. It might give you the hope that it could change your life. But in all honesty, all it is a memory or a narrative based around the memories that has led the advisor to a certain point in life. And of course, this does not mean that you should not take advice, especially because in life we'll be tangled in situations where we don't actually have enough expertise in. So taking advice and implementing it can be a big weapon. But it's just the life advice part that's a bit tricky. One of the biggest understandings or takeaways from this book for me was wisdom is something that you cannot talk about or learn. It is something to be experienced. So I don't think I have to follow someone else's advice to become successful in life. I just have to listen to it, understand it, experience it selflessly on my own. And if it deeply makes sense to me, my body will move on its own. I wouldn't have to force my body to actually do something or act upon it. So that's how an entrepreneur sitting in America monumentally altered my ways of thinking and looking at life. And it's been beautiful.